what on earth is syntropic agriculture, and how, as a new farm, can you use it and still drive an income in the first growing season? This is a fascinating extract that I had from a conversation with Joshua Sparks, who is a natural farming pioneer and is doing a lot of syntropic agriculture, that goes into what is syntropic agriculture, why he's doing it on Birch Farm, and also how it then links in to profitability for a farm, which is really important if you're setting up a new project. So enjoy.
Syntropic is it's a form of agricultural farming that was developed by a chap called Ernest Gosch, who is a Swiss chap who moved to South America. He bought this old kind of like chocolate plantation,
as you do,
as you do, which was totally dead, totally destroyed because it was heavy chemicals and fertilizers. I think the name of the farm when he bought it was Land of No Water or something like that. And then through like observing nature and wild and everything, he developed an agroforestry form of syntropic agriculture, which is, to put it in a nutshell, is a competition system. So we're planting trees at very close density. It's also a heavily pruned system. So I think what a lot of people think is, you put the trees in, you leave it, it becomes overgrown and unmanaged and it's too big. It's not that. Most of syntropic is also the pruning of it in the spring. So we prune, 40 to 60% of a tree out every spring.
Is that like early spring or?
So it's kind of like end of spring, like mid-spring. So we call it like May,
So with the
end of April, May,
with the new vegetative,
new vegetative growth coming in, and so we'll take massive chunks of the trees out, prune it up the side. We'll prune it up high so it lets enough light in. This idea of like, shading out doesn't really exist. Actually, what it is more protection. As the grower, we can dictate the shade, So we could have a syntropic system and our brassicas next to it, and we could be like, right, we need a bit of shade to help these brassicas because even though we're wet in the spring, we're also really hot in the summer now. And so we want that bit of shade. So we can direct how much shade we create, or we can take all the sides out and put it full sun again. So we prune it up high and we decide what our shade quantity is. All the biomass that we prune gets dropped on the ground. And so syntropic is also a way that we can take really bad destroyed land and turn it back into a fertile farming system, because the trees and the biomass that we're producing from that is also building our fertility. So we don't have to bring compost in or anything. We're making the compost in situ, and we're using high density trees to prune out, drop material, but also to start to build those important like bacterial fungal connections that generate fertility. And it's a very diverse system, elder, willow, poplar, oak, cherry, apple, plum. We put loads of different plants in.
What about annuals?
Yeah, so the first year, it's kind of called like the placenta phase, and that's our protection phase. And so for the first year, where everything's quite small, we use more annuals. So for the first year, definitely. Maybe the second year, you can add things like kale, chard, potatoes and broad beans as a classic combination because the potatoes cultivate. And I've noticed, especially on the farm, potatoes build huge beetle diversity. I think the cover and the dankness and the cultivation of the potato just invokes beetle wrath almost on the slug. And so you could say potatoes build beetles in that first stage. So beetles and broad beans, we also prune them as well. So the broad beans, like we do with taking out the tops, and this is what I find hilarious, like we get these scientific papers on syntropic and pruning, and then we realise our granddads and our granddads were almost doing this back in the day when we used to top our beans and everything. But we know by topping the beans, the plant thinks it's being grazed. It will send out different kind of like acids and messages into the ground being like, something's eating me. Let's bulk up a little bit more. And it's the same with the trees. By pruning the trees, the trees think it's under stress. That stress will make it put even more growth on. And when we read books like, The Trees Will Talk and everything, we know those messages get carried through hyphae. And I've seen it firsthand. So when I prune the willow and it's sending those messages out, I know the apple and the plum and the elder next to it are getting the same messages, and they even put even more growth on as well. And so it's
so societal, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's really, it's complicated, which I think in this world of efficiency, everything must be efficient and easy. It kind of gets pushed away. But
the thing with the efficiency though is like it might be efficient in the short term, but the long term, it leads to all of these issues that with farming, it started off efficient, but we're now looking at the repercussions of that efficient system.
Yeah, it's definite. What we're doing is putting something in long term, and I think this word of complication and complicated in business, has taken a bad rap. It's not complicated in the sense of managing it. It's just complicated in the way of comprehending
complex.
it. And it is. It's syntropy.
It's complex,
yeah,
but it's not complicated.
Yeah, exactly. And so, we've seen massive success from it. You've seen it. The trees are 3 times bigger that are grown in syntropic compared to non-syntropic.
To be honest, I feel like seeing that is like the excitement that I have with this, what I can do with my land.
Yeah.
But also how other people can, like, the growth in that small space of time. If that doesn't give people hope and excitement, I don't know what would.
Well, exactly. And like we can say we want to grow food forests. So I love food forests, and I do think they are a solution for the future. We just have to make them in an agricultural business sense. So if I plant my syntropic and syntropic is also about cuttings, sowing things from seed, which sounds ridiculous. Sow trees from seed. Oh no, it'll be in the ground by the time it doesn't. I know firsthand, if you sow a tree from seed, it will catch up to the whip and the big tree within a few years and be stronger for it. And so what we do is
It's the same with vegetables, to be honest. Like, direct sowing, totally underrated. Everyone's like so keen on the module sowing, but like my dad, like tomatoes that just spring up from the ground in a polytunnel, I just leave a few back. I have like this insane cherry tomato tree that was a one thing that I let. That was self-seeded.
They always catch up. So what we do is, syntropic is natural farming in itself. I find I first went into this like it's a set of, it's more of like a philosophy in yourself. Like you kind of have to it's your passion and your idea of what you want from natural farming that makes it work. And so for us, when we plant a syntropic, we don't want to buy in Osmocote, pots, plastic. So 90% of it we do by cuttings. Fruit trees we can't graft. We don't have the facility, so we do buy bare roots in for fruit trees. But nuts, fruit bushes, everything we do by cuttings, because it just minimises that input, and they end up being stronger plants. And we're very windy here, so to be honest, cuttings work better for us. And so what we do is we do a lot of that, and then we also add things called tree nests. And so every metre within a syntropic row will sow like 40 or 30 different tree species in a little nest by seed. And we'll let that grow as a little microforest, and we'll edit that to the things that have done well. So that seed nest could contain oak, birch, poplar, elder, cornus mass, whatever. And we'll edit those trees as they get denser and denser, eventually ending up as just the oak tree. And we do that with fruit as well. We'll sow apple seeds, knowing that we'll only get 30% good ones out of that tasting, but we're happy to take those rests out and keep those 30%, but we get a lot better and stronger trees. So syntropic is also about like minimizing your inputs, your plastic, trying to help the environment as much as possible as well. And when we grow a food forest, for example, if we do it as a syntropic idea, so if we think, right, I want my food forest to look like this 20 years time, and so you put those trees in that you want to be there in 20 years, then the spaces in between, we can add the syntropy. So we can add the willows and the poplars. We could add raspberries for fruiting for the first 2 years. We start to get money in the first couple of years. And then we could turn that into another fruit that we can harvest, knowing that one day they'll all disappear because a forest will begin to develop. But we can use syntropic to create a profit every single year by putting in different crops. So first year, potato and beans, brilliant. Second year, raspberries, brilliant. Third year, we may start to get things like elderflowers and berries. Year 10, we're starting to get our first nuts. And so we can add it. And eventually those willows and poplars will either be cut down, shaded out and gone. And we'll end up with the forest that we had our kind of like vision for 20 years prior. But it just frees you up a lot more. And from a business point of view, it allows you to have that agroforestry and habitat and natural farming, while also using it to generate some kind of income in the first few difficult years, basically, that it takes for the trees to get up.
Click here to watch the full video podcast with Joshua Sparks. He goes through so many interesting things, and it's also available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.